You are listening to Salty Believer Unscripted, a conversation on Christian ministry and the Christian life.
This is Salty Believer Unscripted. I'm Josiah Walker.
I'm Bryan Catherman.
And on today's episode, we have a special guest with us again, Robert Kinney, the Director of Ministries at the Charles Simeon Trust. Welcome back, Robert.
Great to be here, and great to be in person.
I was just going to say, flying in all the way from Vienna, which would be a lie.
We've had you on the podcast before via Zoom, but this is the first time we've had you live and in person in the studio. And by studio, I mean Bryan's office here at the church building.
Right. So you came into Chicago, though, right?
I did.
Then you flew out here. You're doing a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
All right. So you didn't come just for this.
Well, I came to Salt Lake in part for this, sure.
Woohoo!
We'll take it.
We'll take that, yeah.
But hey, we're touching base with you because we're getting ready to go to a workshop that you're leading.
Charles Simeon Trust Workshop.
Charles Simeon Trust Workshop in Bellflower, California, southeastern LA.
There you go. I was like, where's Bellflower? Because I didn't even remember that was where it was.
Yeah.
Southern California.
Well, that's the kind of prep work I do. So that's where we're headed. And we've been telling our listeners that we're going to kind of podcast our journey out that way. And so rather than doing this in the car with you, since you're flying and we're driving, we just want to take some time to kind of talk with you and let our listeners know what to expect in a workshop.
And let us know what to expect in
Mostly
a workshop.
Lots of crying.
Oh, great.
So we had on Brett Riceley earlier, and he's been a participant in the workshop, but you're a leader of the workshop, so you could kind of give us some, from the leader's perspective, what people need to do to kind of be prepared and ready for that.
Let's get some background first. How many workshops do you do? I know you have a lot of different folks doing these workshops, but how many do you do like in a year, every year?
In a given year, somewhere between 15 and 20 probably.
So you're averaging almost 2 a month then.
Yeah.
Somewhere in that ballpark. And then what else do you do for the Simeon Trust?
Oh, a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Okay. Is that what the title?
Director of Ministries seems about as loaded as associate pastor.
It does.
So I manage the other directors who manage the staff. So I'm sort of the senior manager of people. Some vision and sort of executing vision. I work a lot with our chairman, Dave Helm, on that. Some institutional relationships, but really a lot of what I do is just quality control. So making sure my team have the resources they need to do a good job, and then that they're actually doing a good job.
Cool. Awesome. And then you lead workshops and.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to this workshop, 2 Timothy.
Yes.
Right. Epistles, and we've never done this. So I'm sure you've spoke with lots of people who've never done this. In a nutshell, what should we, besides the video we could already watch,
sure,
which we have, what should we really be expecting?
Yeah, so it's the image we use is a 3-legged stool. So this is not scripture, reason, and tradition. It's not that one. It's a different 3-legged stool. But the virtue of a 3-legged stool is that without 3 legs, it doesn't stand, right?
Sure.
A 2-legged stool isn't really a stool. It's a pile of junk. So there are 3 elements of this workshop that are essential. And that's what you will spend your time in. So the first one is the instructional sessions, 6 one-hour sessions where we're going to interactively work through, led by one of the instructors, interactively work through a principle for exposition. So either a conviction about preaching that you need to have to do exposition well, or most of them will be tools for preaching expositionally. Okay,
so I've done online courses.
Yeah.
And I've done the one like I've seen you on a bunch of these online courses. I've also seen, it's amazing to me how many people are on these online courses. I think J.I. Packer's on one.
Yep.
I think D.A. Carson's on one.
Don's on several of them.
Yeah, there's a bunch. Brian Chappell's on some stuff. Yep. So if I'm watching, and then you know who who's the guy innocent?
Michael Lawrence.
Michael Lawrence. His stuff is amazing, and I didn't even know who he was. Right, no offense, Michael Lawrence, if you listen to this, but I didn't know, and so I was introduced to him. I'm like, this is really helpful. A lot of people like that. Mm-hmm. Is the workshops where you're filming these?
Yeah, so a lot of the instructional sessions in the online courses are some of what we think are the best of the best from our live workshops. They lack the coherence because we're trying to go a lot broader in the online courses, whereas in the workshop itself, it's going to be pretty narrowly focused on we're in epistles this week.
Right.
Our primary example is going to be 2 Timothy. And this is where it gets to the other two legs of the stool. In the online courses, you're kind of absorbing. Yeah.
Right.
It's information download from a video, and we try to make that as interactive as possible.
But still, they still say, okay, hit pause, look
Yeah.
at this yourself, and then they edit out the conversation with the people
Right.
in that regard, just
Right.
because it's. So you're kind of going, okay, I know I missed that.
Right. So even in the instructional sessions, those 6 sessions, it's going to be a lot more live, engaging, interactive in the workshop. And
How
and it's
long is
paired-
that? So like, I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you.
No,
but,
go ahead.
but like in the online course, I'm watching, let's say it's persuasion, right?
Sure.
And I think that's you lecturing on something in persuasion, and then you have a conversation somewhere. I'm kind of spitballing here,
Yeah.
but like, hey, let's look in this text, and what do we see here? And then in the video, it comes across, because it was edited,
Yeah.
as being like 10 seconds long. How long are those interactions? Are we talking like 10-minute interactions sometimes?
Might be a minute, might be 2, might be 4. It's going to
Okay.
vary.
Okay.
So those videos, if you're watching a 35, 40-minute video, those are hour-long sessions. In a
Oh,
workshop.
okay. That's helpful. Yeah,
Okay.
that's helpful. So,
So-
that's what's gotten cut out, is some of those pieces.
Yeah.
Because some of those videos are 45 minutes, but some are, like you said, 35. Okay. That's
Right.
helpful to know.
Right, and that's in part because on video you can't really capture the dynamic of a group discussion.
Right.
The way
Right.
I mean, we just don't have that many cameras in a room or
Right, or
permission.
microphones
It just
and
doesn't
all-
make
yeah.
sense. Right.
Yeah.
So the other thing is in the workshop itself, those interactive instructional sessions are then paired with the other 2 legs.
Oh, okay.
Right? So the small groups and the expositions. The expositions are easy to explain. We try to shut down each day, or sometimes in the middle of the day, a sermon.
Which you see those on the online courses too. That's
Right.
like the bonus material,
Right.
right? So you do those are coming from that
Right.
same environment. Okay,
Sometimes
cool.
example sermon. Well,
Right.
it's a lot of the online course sermons are not necessarily from workshops. Those might be other examples.
Oh, okay.
Because again, we're trying to go broader in terms of covering the genre more than in a workshop. The sermons will generally be from that book.
Actually, now that you say that makes sense, because some of them are at a church.
Yeah.
But I think I've seen David. Is it Cameron? David Cameron?
Camara?
Camara. Yeah, I was trying to think of his name. I think I've seen lecture, and then literally I see him preach a sermon. I'm like, the same equipment and the screen and everything are all in the room,
Yeah.
right? So that one probably
Yeah.
came from
Sometimes
that
it's from a
environment.
workshop.
Okay.
Sometimes from a church.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
But the expositions are important because not as models, and we try to say this pretty explicitly. You guys still think that we're up there like these are model sermons. No. We're actually, that's part of the persuasion of the workshop, is that a lot of preachers, a lot of expositors don't actually get a chance to listen to other preachers.
Right.
Sure.
Certainly not live.
Right.
They might hear, podcasts or whatever.
Which there is a big difference. I listen
Sure.
to 3 or 4 sermons from a different range. I've started listening to Hennessy Baptist and some of these others. There is definitely a difference.
Sure. Well, and that's also a sermon then for that church, as
Exactly.
opposed to
That's
in
what
a
I mean.
workshop,
Yeah.
a sermon for the guys in the room.
Well, that's
Right.
what I mean. You're not part of the intended audience
Right.
when you're listening
And
and,
so-
you're eavesdropping on somebody else's preaching.
And so the
right?
goal for the sermons is actually part of the persuasion of the workshop. It's to give each guy the experience of sitting under the Word of God preached, experiencing what that is, to have the Word expounded clearly. I mean, I hope they're good models, but I actually mostly hope each guy in that room is being reminded of why it is he gives himself to preach
Right.
by being the recipient of preaching.
So
Yeah.
along those lines, you're saying, one of the benefits of the workshops is you're actually getting to interact with other preachers and that versus the online where it's just kind of watching and
Sure.
listening.
Right.
So along those lines, maybe I'm new to preaching or I'm new to expositional
He
preaching.
has 34 and a half sermons.
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
It'll be 35 tomorrow.
35 and
But
a half. Whatever.
Should I be nervous if I'm coming to this room where there's some of the pastors are more experienced? Do you see kind of some new or novice guys with some veteran
And
guys?
who shows up to these things?
Oh, that's an interesting question. For the men's workshops in the U.S., it's generally speaking pastors, all varieties of pastors, some elders, some other types of church leaders.
Oh, and so you got guys who've been preaching for 2 decades?
We got guys who've been preaching for 4 decades.
Okay. So and then all the way down to
We've
I've
got
got
guys-
6 sermons in or 2 sermons or something?
Yeah, some of them are seminary students who've got 0 sermons.
Okay.
So
Pretty big range.
Yeah, it is, and it makes it challenging sometimes to put them all in small groups together.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the worksheet I've had to put together, and I'm thinking, man, is Robert going to call on me? Do I have to read this whole thing in front of everybody?
Which Brett
Yeah.
told us kind of a little bit of the process. I'm guessing it'll be the same, like
Yeah.
reading it out, someone else. Yeah.
Yeah, so and that's actually the third leg of the workshop.
Okay,
is
so
the
hold
small
on.
group.
We kept interrupting you.
Yeah.
And I'm interrupting you right now
Yeah.
to go back and get a quick summary. So leg number 1, correct me where I'm wrong, is instruction.
Yep.
And then I think leg number 2, I think you said demonstration?
Yeah, sermons.
Sermons, okay. Sermons,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so
I
principles of exposition, examples of preaching.
Great.
Now, the practice in small groups.
Okay.
Which is the thing we actually spend the most time in. We spend more time in small groups than we do in instructional sessions.
Okay.
And that is on purpose. Because that's where the real work is done. That's where you're going to present. You're going to have 5 minutes to walk us through your work.
The assigned text that you get.
Yeah, so you were assigned a text, you were given a worksheet.
Right.
Here are questions to help guide your preparation in this passage. Now you're going to get 5 minutes to walk us through that. Yeah. Somebody else is going to be assigned the same text. They're going to get 5 minutes to walk us through their preparation on that same passage. Each of you is going to have a responder assigned to you who's going to ask you some questions.
Oh, boy.
And lead us into a group discussion on your work.
That's
That's
great.
where the feedback, the coaching, the critique, occasionally the crying happens.
so Brett said...
I'm kidding on that, but
Well, I can see.
I mean, people have cried, but like
I mean, I'll be
that's not a-
puking in a bucket over the
that's not a
nervousness of it all.
regular thing.
But
So, do you have guys? Brett had said, and maybe not being just a participant, but being one who oversees these things. You don't want to say it the same way Brett said it, but he said, yeah, we had guys that showed up that were like teachers' pets. They poured so much into it, it almost looked ridiculous. I think that's how he said it. Maybe he didn't say ridiculous, but it was over the top.
just that grade A student.
Just
yeah.
over the top. Like, did you read 100 commentaries, and did you do this, and did you that? And then you had all the way down to, I didn't know what I was doing, so I really didn't do anything. Would you say that's a fair assessment of how these might go?
Yeah, I mean that's two versions. That's two.
He was giving us the polls.
Yeah.
And he said it's everywhere in between there, different ranges of what people do.
Yeah, I don't know that I would identify those as polls, because then there's the old guy who's been doing it for 30 years and is like, this is my method for preparation.
So he doesn't do the worksheet?
So I don't really care about your worksheet, but he comes in prepared and has
Right.
done some of those.
That's
things.
fair.
Sure.
That's funny,
Right?
actually.
We try to mitigate against at least the. This sounds like I'm throwing them under the bus. I'm not meaning to. The seminary student mentality of I need to have read every commentary
Right.
and come in. Like, we try to mitigate against that. So if there's a really important note at the bottom of the worksheet that says you are allowed to bring this like front and back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's a page, right?
We
It's
don't,
a page.
We don't want more than that, because
Right.
I don't care what 100 commentators have said. I want to know how you've prepared this passage.
Sure.
Okay, can we get...
And you need
really,
to have done enough work to get it down to a front and back page.
Right. Yeah.
Can we get really practical then?
Sure.
And we'll just use my example that we're not looking at. We don't have it in front of us. But, I have answers in there that I feel like I could speak to for quite a bit. But they're not... I mean, it's like... A couple of the answers on the worksheet say 1 sentence. Okay, that's fair, 1 sentence. But here's a breakdown. Okay, well, here's 3 lines breaking this down. Here's a context. And it's like 2 sentences, 3 sentences. It's this. Is that kind of what generally is expected? Because I'm looking at that going, I have no idea what to expect. I'm going to walk in here and present this. Am I shortchanging it? I mean, that's the hard part about it. So I don't know what's expected. Well, you're nodding, so I'm assuming I've got the right answer. You're about to tell me how silly I am.
Well, I don't want this to sound
No, let me have it, brother. We'll cry on the podcast.
glib in any way. Part of it is we don't really have expectations on
Okay.
that. So some guys will, take the first question, the structure question, right? Some guys will come
So
in with a
really quickly,
27-point outline.
Can we hit pause really quick?
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this, I just want to give our listeners context. If you're listening to this, you can go to, is it SimeonTrust.org,
Yeah.
and there's some resources there. You can see this worksheet we're talking about. It is available for download. It is free there. It's in all the other stuff too.
I think SimeonTrust.org/prepare will get you directly to the page.
Is that
that's
where
on.
it is? Okay, yeah.
think
So
so.
we're talking about a sheet that if you're preaching and you don't even know what to look at, this is a very helpful document that asks really good questions. So I just wanted to throw that out there. If someone's listening going, please, what are you talking about? Okay, so back to, they've got the sheet, first question, structure.
Yeah, so the question is asking what's the structure of the passage and how did you arrive at that? That's basically what the question is asking. Some guys will come in with, here is like, discourse analysis, every phrase laid out, aligned in this kind of beautiful overarching structure. Some guys will come in with 1, 2, 3, each one a word.
Here's kind of where he's going.
Right.
That's it.
Like homiletical outline, properly alliterated. and if the goal of the small group was to get at the right answer of the passage, like what's this passage about, great, then I'd have a preference. But what I'm saying is we don't really have an expectation because the goal is actually to help you in your preparation.
Right. To get us thinking.
So I don't really care how much or how little you have in your answer there because whatever you have, that's the starting point. Now we're going to help you.
Now we work through that.
So that guy who's got the 3-point homiletical outline, I'm going to ask him questions like, how did you get that? What tools did you use?
Gotcha.
Right.
Do you think these words actually capture that, or is that you trying to be cute because you've confused structure of the passage with your homiletical outline?
Okay.
So the guy who's got 27 points, I'm going to ask him, all right, what? You're not going to preach a 27-point sermon. I don't care who you are, and if you do, it's not going to be very effective, at least homiletically. So how are you taking that down to some larger movements? Like, how are you understanding the concepts and the logic, right? So whatever they give me, we're going to start there because the goal is actually to help you in your preparation, to take a step forward, to make progress. It's not to get the right answer. I don't care if we get the right answer.
That's helpful, and that's reassuring that I'm not trying to get like the specific right answer, but it's just kind of like a methodology to it.
Well, it's really helpful for me because I have 2 assigned passages, and I also have a lot of other pastoral duties here, and I was also working, and Josiah, you're working on prepping sermons. Like, I have some time, but I cannot sacrifice too much of my church ministry as I'm doing this, so I would just take each question. I limited myself to, I think the total worksheet, I think I gave myself 2 hours, which is not what I do when I preach, right? But I have 2 of these texts. That's 4 hours heading into this. I did the work.
You could spend some more time on it.
I probably could, yeah. I realize that. I'm fully confessing that ahead of time.
All right.
But I probably would be well benefited to do that. But I also have numerous things.
Yeah. Well, so double down.
All right.
Or double dip. I think that's probably the better way. Well, double down on double dip.
Do something double.
The goal of the workshop is to help each guy make progress in his expositional work, right? To make progress in his sermon prep so that he preaches clearer, more effective expositions of God's word. A secondary benefit of the workshop is apprehension of a book.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly.
So I'm saying double dip. Use this as an opportunity to launch a series in 2 Timothy.
I would have loved to have done that.
Because then you've got 2 sermons pretty well prepped.
100%.
If you go way more than 2 hours on each one.
Yeah. So I would.
You're getting exposed to 6 more
yep.
in the small group, plus 3 more in the sermons.
So what I need to do is line my preaching calendar up against all the workshops.
Well, and that's kind of what Brett talked about.
And a lot of guys do that. A lot of guys will take whatever the Simeon Workshop is that year. And over the next year, suddenly there's a series on 1 Samuel.
Brett actually had said, I said, you're going to go to the next one in Des Moines and do it. And he said, well, it depends on what they're doing, kind of because of that. For us, it was, we've already got the calendar laid out because we have multiple preachers in it.
Yeah.
And we're kind of coming into this late, and where can we go? We need to drive. And so it didn't fit the parameters. I use the worksheet if it's helpful. I do use this worksheet in my preaching prep.
Yeah.
So I'm like, this is really good stuff. But in any case, I'm doing the first worksheet, and I realize after I've typed it up, I've made all the the copies for everybody. I'm like, now that I look at the second section of text, I see this connection that I sort of loosely saw. But now that I've really drilled down, I see it better. But I didn't go back and put all that back in the first sheet. I'm like, well, I'll talk about it, but I don't think I'm going to write it up. So a part of me is like, I hope I don't look like I'm just coming in loosey-goosey. I'm prepared to talk about it, but So part of it is I don't know what level to expect.
Well, and again, the whole goal of the workshop is progress, and I'll tell you guys next week, especially after day one, don't be afraid to that very night go back, because you're also going to see 2 or 3 or 4 other people present.
Right.
And you're going to see things in the text that will affect your second presentation. And we encourage guys, you know what? Go back to your hotel, go back to your Airbnb, go back to your office, wherever it is you go in the evening. Feel free to try to make some progress, right?
Right.
Actually
Right.
do the work.
Yeah.
Again.
Which is helpful, because I thought I could handwrite some stuff on here, but it won't be on all the copies. Anyway, that's good to know, though.
Which is why you get 2 passages and not just one.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why they're on separate days. We actually want you to have the space to be able to make progress even within the 3 days we're getting together.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is good. So the part of the other issue is I probably should have started working on this quite a bit earlier, and that's probably where I failed. Except at the point where I realized that I didn't have time to go back. I didn't have a DeLorean to go back in time and fix it. Like, I am stuck.
We also don't want you to feel this as a burden. So you don't usually get your assignments until about a month out anyway.
Right. Yeah, I think that was about the case
Yeah.
for us.
I don't. We don't want you guys going down the rabbit hole on these.
Sure. So along those lines, what's the best thing that I could do to prepare for a workshop? Is it really investing my time in those passages in that worksheet, or what is it reading that text or that book of the Bible? What would you recommend for someone coming to a workshop?
Yeah, because books hang together. Books are coherent units, right? Anything less than that is something we've sort of artificially subdivided. So your familiarity with the book and investing in your prep on those 2 passages you've been assigned are the best things you can do. Because then when you get there, you're able to engage in a conversation with the other guys on their passages that you didn't prepare.
Sure.
Which I didn't allude to that, but I've been reading. That's what I've been doing, is reading 1st and 2nd Timothy over and over and over again. So I didn't include that in my time, because I watch these online courses. Like, I want to really get to there ahead of where we're getting. I want to think it through, but that has been really helpful.
Do you have to go through first principles before you go to a workshop?
You don't have to.
Should you?
It can be helpful, because like in anything along these lines, a certain amount of it is just vocabulary apprehension. So what do we actually mean by structure? What do we actually mean by context? There are 4 kinds of context, right? So first principles will give you a head start on the vocabulary for your first workshop, and it will feel less foreign. You will have seen some of the pictures and heard some of the definitions and seen some of the concepts before. Perfect. There are a lot of guys who come in and haven't done that, and they are truly lost.
They're going, what are you talking about?
Right.
Yeah.
But the pictures, the first time you see the picture, it's mind-blowing, right? You see it 2 or 3 times.
Some of the pictures are pretty cheesy, but some of them are decent.
Some of you go, oh, that's really interesting. Hey, we're out of time, but I have about 10 really get down to the real brass tacks questions.
Okay.
Do you have time to do another
Go for it.
podcast with us?
Yeah.
All right. Can we?
Yeah.
He probably needs contact info shared, all that. It's your job. I'll step out of the way.
Yeah, so Robert, if people have questions about maybe a workshop or an online course or just a follow-up question for you, is there a way that they can get a hold of you or get a hold of some guys at the Simeon Trust?
Yeah, info@SimeonTrust.org goes to a group of people on the team that will make sure your question goes to the right person.
Perfect.
Say that one more time.
Info
Okay.
at SimeonTrust.org.
Perfect.
I see all the info emails, so I may jump in personally
Awesome.
sometimes, or my team may take care of it.
Perfect.
Hey, before you close this
Sometimes
down,
we don't communicate with each other very well, and 3 or 4 different people answer the question.
you get multiples. So I want to ask things like, what's the craziest thing you've ever seen at a workshop?
Sure.
What's the worst thing a person could do? The best. Like, I want to get to those.
All
So
right,
our listeners
yeah.
should listen to the next podcast, because I want to get to those. If he's willing to answer them.
Yeah.
Now you have the important information. Tune in next time for maybe some fun questions. Until next time.
Thanks for listening. Salty Believer Unscripted is a production of SaltyBeliever.com. Visit the website to find more resources like the podcast you've just listened to.